There it is. The Cardinals break out of the losing skid with an offensive eruption at the plate, and Nolan Gorman leading the charge with a clutch eighth-inning swing. All coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. The Cardinals are out of the doldrums. They get a big win in Atlanta, 10-4 on Tuesday. The bullpen game for the Braves, Andre Pallante for the Cardinals, but this one comes down to the late innings as the Cardinal bats score 3 in the 8th, 3 in the 9th to cement a 10-4 victory. Oh boy, did they need one like that, as things had been getting pretty bleak when you think about the 1-10 road record coming into Tuesday. Well, now it's 2-10. And the Cardinals have an opportunity to go for a road series win on Wednesday morning early. So we're trying to get this podcast out as quickly as we possibly can so folks get a chance to listen before the 11:15 local start in St. Louis time on Wednesday. Miles Michaelis taking on Bryce Elder. We're going to talk a lot about the Cardinal bats tonight, and one decision in particular that I frankly don't even think ended up being much of a decision from Cardinal manager Oliver Marmol. A lot of folks on social media were abuzz about the sixth inning spot where they went against the numbers, you could say. They left Nolan Gorman in to face a left-handed reliever, Dylan Lehey, in a key spot, and you know what? He wasn't able to come through. Thomas Saggese was sitting there on the Cardinal bench, but Oliver Marmol didn't pivot. I don't think he was even tempted to do so, and I'll explain why that is and why it's part of a larger conversation happening about the Cardinals team in 2025 is they do have an eye on the future and what the development of some of these young players is going to mean to that future in St. Louis. We're getting a glimpse into that already, and sometimes you can have both. You can have the transition year, play the developmental angle for a player that you're trying to see what he does and what he makes out of these certain spots. They're clutch situations as he grows up in the big leagues before our eyes. And, yeah, you have to extend a little bit of latitude to a player like that. And we're talking about Nolan Gorman. But also, the other side of that is when those guys come through, it maybe turns out to have been the best possible thing for your team. And that's what was the case on Tuesday night when Nolan Gorman didn't pinch hit for him in the 6th. He comes right back up in the 8th for another opportunity, and with the bases loaded, he clears them with an extra base hit. And that made it 7-4, and the Cardinals never looked back from there. So we'll talk about all that. We'll even play a little bit of audio from tonight's FanDuel Sports Network postgame show because I think Oliver Marmol spelled out some aspects of what that runway is really going to look like for Nolan Gorman. The Cardinals intend to keep their word with that, and tonight was an example. Let's start, though, at the beginning. Andre Pallante, as we mentioned, was the starting pitcher for the Cardinals today, and this was probably the worst start that the Cardinals have gotten from anybody since before the beginning of this losing streak. Like, Pallante was the first start of the 5-game losing skid, pitching last Thursday in New York. Remember, he had that second inning where he gave up 4 runs, but he ended up going 6, and that was all he gave up over 6 innings. So, not a quality start, but the next best thing, and one that had the Cardinal bats been a little bit more productive, they might have had a chance to win that game on Thursday. He gave them a chance. Today, he honestly put them in more of a bind than did he give the Cardinals a chance. But you know what? Unless you got 5 starting pitchers that are going to the All-Star game, you're going to have games from all of them throughout the season that don't look as good as some of the other games. 4 1/3, 4 runs, all of them earned, a couple of long balls against Pallante, and he walked 3 as well. 7 hits given up in the game, season ERA up to 4.05. So this was definitely not a bright spot for Pallante, one of his lesser outings this season. And it was really command. There was one inning in particular where he just kept walking guys in full counts and he couldn't get over the hump there. The curveball, he had evidently told some of the reporters before the game that the curveball was not feeling good. Maybe not before today's game, but in recent days, Jim Hayes with the in-game report on FanDuel Sports Network had made mention of that, and then we kind of saw that play out, that he was spiking several of those. I felt that Pedro Pajes was back there fighting for his life sometimes. He just didn't have a feel for the knuckle curve. And it's one of those things where you want to keep throwing a pitch because you don't want the hitters to just completely ignore the possibility of you presenting it. but he didn't have a feel for it. And so it maybe contributed to some of the walks, and then you get a little bit limited more in your repertoire, and you don't feel as confident in a certain weapon. And so maybe that contributes to the couple of home runs that he gave up. Sean Murphy got him, and Murphy had good numbers against him coming in, was able to take him deep. Olsen of the Braves had a home run as well in this game. But when it was all said and done, the Cardinals were still keeping things close as of the departure for Andre Pallante in this game. The Cardinals actually had the lead after the Lars Nootbaar home run in the third. Pallante gives up 3 in the fourth. He gives up 1 in the fifth before making his exit. Cardinals trail 4-2, but then they get right back to it in the top of the sixth inning to make it even Steven. And I do mention Steven because Matz was very good in relief tonight too. We talked about, so everybody should have known the expectations if you've been keeping up with B-Schaeff Daily. We knew that we would see Matz either today or tomorrow in a bullpen capacity because Thursday's off day necessitates, or rather doesn't necessitate, keeping the six-man rotation for this week. They have all the extra rest that they'll need for those other 5 starters, and so they knew that with the bullpen a little bit under the gun right now, Steven Matz would be a great choice to, well, basically fill some innings either today or Wednesday. And I think they ideally would have had him held back for Wednesday because anytime Miles Michaelis has gotten to the third time through the lineup, Oliver Marmol has been looking with his finger on the button to take him out of the games. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. If you look at the numbers, that's where Miles tends to get beat and hit the hardest, when the guys in the other lineup get a chance to see him for a third time, and there's some real thump in this Atlanta lineup. And so I feel like it's still going to be applicable tomorrow that I'll give you my keys to victory for the Cardinals on Wednesday. It's to score a bunch of runs like they did tonight, because I think for Miles, you're not going to be very likely to see him go much longer than 5 innings. And when he gets that third time through the order, they'll be looking to rescue him and try to avoid some of those tough ABs that you could potentially see against the Rileys, the Ozunas, the Matt Olsons of the world. So we'll see what that ends up looking like on Wednesday. But they did have to end up using Steven Matz tonight. But I tell you what, folks, the Cardinals don't win this game without the contributions of Steven Matz. I'll say that about a few different players, but Steven Matz is certainly one of them, and he has answered the bell this year in a way that I really didn't necessarily see it coming to this extent. He's got a 1.86 ERA. He was brilliant tonight for the role that they needed him in. Comes in to rescue the remainder of the fifth inning and gets him through 2 2/3. So Pallante covers the first 4 1/3. Steven Matz gets him through the end of the seventh. And in those 2 2/3, he gave up 1 hit, 1 walk. So basically worked his way through the lineup once, and then once it was no longer a favorable scenario, they were able to get Lehey in there for the 8th inning, and that is why I have coined Kyle Leahy as Kyle Everyday He. We're going to come up with a new hashtag. Hashtag Kyle Everyday He. It's like every D and then Ahy, E-A-H-Y, Kyle Everyday He, because he pitches every day. And the reason he pitches every day is because Oliver Marmol trusts him. And the reason that Oliver Marmol trusts him is because he's got a 1.80 ERA, and he has been nails in any role the Cardinals have used him in. And I kind of liked what I heard on the broadcast on the TV side tonight, the notion that, hey, maybe Kyle Leahy next year or sometime in the future is somebody the Cardinals could look at to stretch out even further as a potential starter, because the stuff has really played up in his bullpen role this year. He's able to grab his 4th hold of the young season tonight. And we do remember back into spring training kind of talking about that a little bit, where he was kind of grouped with the starters at the very beginning and was somebody that they wanted to get some extra innings under his belt and lengthen him out a little bit. I don't know about, for the rotation this year. I mean, they've got seemingly plenty of options that they're trying to pour through. And frankly, they can't afford Lehey to not be in the bullpen right now with how reliable and how much of a staple that he has become in that role. But I think there's something to be said for Kyle Leahy. He's another guy that just takes the ball every day. Yes, could he eventually wear down later on this season as a result of it? Sure. That's definitely a risk. I don't think Oliver Marmol has any other choice. And there'd be people that would say, well, why don't they go out and sign somebody? Go get somebody. That's just not the vibe this year, gang. Like, they signed Phil Maton, and now they're going to say, we've got middle relievers at home. And so those are the guys that the Cardinals are going to end up rolling with. But it's going to be something that potentially elevates Kyle Leahy's career, because we're going to see him in a lot of these types of scenarios. He's already surpassed Ryan Fernandez. Like, I get it. He started out as a middle reliever. He's part of the setup crew now. Like Kyle Leahy, 7th inning man, Absolutely. Eighth inning man in a night like tonight, absolutely. Whatever's needed, I think, is what he's going to be able to provide. And Oliver Marmol's not going to hesitate to continue going to him because he's just been so darn reliable. So you like to see that from tonight's game. Him and Steven Matz, I mean, that's the answer. When you have a starting pitcher that doesn't get you through 5, it's been a rarity of late, other than Michaelis with the 4 2/3 in his previous outing a handful of days ago. The starters have been going 6 pretty reliably. Tonight, Palante fell a little bit short of that, but that's the way it's supposed to look for the good teams. When a starter doesn't have his best outing, didn't completely kill you, but clearly didn't have his good stuff tonight and struggled with command, so he gives up 4 runs in 4 1/3. You need 2 guys to cover the next 3 2/3 innings, and that's what Matz and Lehey were able to do. Those guys deserve a lot of credit for why the Cardinals win tonight. They do end up throwing a relatively rusty Ryan Helsley, despite the 6-run lead in the ninth. You had to, because it had been so long since he pitched, and I wouldn't worry about it either because he can pitch tomorrow. Maybe got up there a little bit in pitch count with 22. He damn well better be available tomorrow. Like if the Cardinals have a 1-run lead in the 9th inning, I'll bet you anything that Ryan Helsley is the guy that's pitching. If not, it would it'd be worthy of some criticism there. But he'll be out there. I just trust me on that. He'll be out there, and if I have to eat these words later, I will. So you can probably count on 1 inning from Helsley tomorrow if it's a save situation. You will see. I probably not more out of Steven Matz necessarily through 39 pitches tonight, and so I would think they wouldn't be going back-to-back with him. So what that tells you is Phil Maton, Jojo Romero, be ready for your redemption tour after a rough game 1 in this series, because I think you'll see an inning out of both of those guys tomorrow if this game ends up being one that's close and still in the balance in the late innings. And you'll try to pick your spot for if John King can contribute. Ryan Fernandez very well may need to pitch an inning tomorrow. If this is the case for Miles Michaelis, only gets through 4 or 5 innings before that third time comes a knocking, Fernandez might be a guy that you see have to be the bridge. And there's some breath holding, I think, that'll be involved in that, but that's what the Cardinals may need from this bullpen on Wednesday. Because I'll continue to say, if you're not going to option Ryan Fernandez, if the insistence is like, this is our guy, okay, he's got to be your guy then on a game like tomorrow. And I imagine that's what you'll probably see, is him being somebody that's available to give you an inning, maybe more, if the circumstances dictate. But I feel like I veered off the path in talking about the Cardinal offense tonight and started getting into the nitty-gritty on the pitching. So let's rejoin this podcast already in progress and talk about Nolan Gorman. There was a spot in the 6th inning. Dylan Lee is the pitcher for the Atlanta Braves. He's a left-hander, and the spot due up was Nolan Gorman's spot. He was in the lineup today for the Cardinals, starting at second base. We do need to mention a bit of an injury update, so I'll clean that up real quickly here. Mason Wynn did return from the injured list. Sajasi did not go down. It was Siani that went down to AAA instead of Sajasi, the reason we kind of thought, all right, let's talk about Sajasi, because he came up originally when Wynn went down. Thomas Sajasi carried a 900 OPS in that span. There was just no reason to send him back down. I said on this podcast, John Mozeliak's not going to do that. He's not going to send Sajasi down. I was willing to bite the bullet if I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. Siani is who got sent down. Now, there is maybe some skepticism over how close of a call that was, because Brendan Donovan was out of the lineup on Tuesday after a rib subluxation. He popped a rib out and needed it to be popped back in, and he's in some pain. That was the deal. They're hoping to avoid an IL stint for him. The good news is it can end up being retroactive, so if the Cardinals can get their way through Wednesday's game without needing him, and I'm sure that they're not going to make a roster move unless they're just 100% sure he needs to be on the injured list, they'll get the opportunity to wait Tuesday, wait Wednesday, wait Thursday, because they're coming back home for a weekend series against the Brewers on Friday, and they'll be able to, I think, retroactive that IL stint up to 3 days if they need to. So if they were to put him on Friday, they would be able to retroactive it to Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Or they could actually put him on the IL on the off day Thursday, retroactive it to, I guess Tuesday would be the first day, because that was the first day he didn't play. So forget what I just said. Tuesday could be the start date of an IL stint still for Brendan Donovan, even though they haven't done anything yet, if they decide that he needs one. Hopefully he doesn't, because he's still been their most productive hitter. I believe he's sitting around 927 on the OPS. But you would ask yourself, like, is that part of the reason that Siani was the option instead of Sajacy? They need a little bit of extra coverage with the infield right now. Maybe. To me, hopefully all that is convenient. Like, there are some times where I would say, hey, here's what the Cardinals have said, and I don't believe them. Like, it's not that they're trying to obfuscate intentionally or lie about something, but I would look at it and say, like, if they can get away with saying, hey, Siani, we're really sorry, but Brendan's kind of dealing with something, that's the reason we got to send you down, buddy. It's not you, it's us, right? If they can tell that to Siani, well, they're going to have to tell it to the media as well, just to make sure that they've got their ducks in a row and it doesn't look like, they just fed Siani a line of BS and then sent him on his way to Memphis. I feel like this is a case where it's just like not a happy coincidence because you don't want Brendan Donovan to be injured, but you could see where, like, okay, it would have been very bad optics to send JC back down with the way that he's been performing, but you got this Brendan Donovan thing, so maybe that's the way that you can couch it and say, well, we got to have him around his extra coverage, and he's earned it. Siani is somebody that I don't think they wanted to send down. Oliver Marmol probably didn't want to see him sent down, but I think that was just the numbers game that had to be played here, especially with you being one infield injury away from that looking really, really dumb, because there's not a lot of upside right now to Michael Siani. I think on a winning team, I love having a Siani roll off the bench be something that a manager can use every single game. Because if a team is consistently winning 4-1 and it's 5-3 late and they want to bring him in for defense, I think that's lovely. That's a great archetype of a player to have for those types of teams. Look around, though. The Cardinals haven't been that type of team over the past week. They're not in these close games where they're ahead and therefore able to sacrifice offense for defense and bring Siani in or bring him in as a pinch runner. Like, it's been more of a rarity where that has made sense. And so I just don't think they have the luxury right now of Siani. And optically, it was not going to look good either if you send Sajacy down, and he's been one of the only guys performing in the middle of a 5-game losing streak. Now, all that being said, I don't know how much Thomas Sajacy is about to play. It may not be all that much time, especially if Brendan Donovan comes back. Because, and I talked about this on the radio show for KTGR earlier today when we found out that it was Siani and that Sajacy was staying but not playing in the lineup on Tuesday. I kind of rolled my eyes and said, okay, what are they doing? Like, they get your good bats in the lineup. Oliver Marmol wins, though, because he put the bats in the lineup, and I said it on the show, but that was after I was a little bit sarcastic about it, and I said, you know what? I better come back around, because what tends to happen, they had a plan for what the game was going to look like on Tuesday against Scott Blewett, who has never had a save opportunity in his career, and it's kind of obvious why, because you can't necessarily let a guy named Blewett be your closer. I just think that doesn't really vibe. So, small joke aside, he got through 3 innings of this game for Atlanta, but it was a bullpen start. Like, today was the Strider day, Spencer Strider, but he went on the injured list with a hamstring earlier this week, so the Cardinals luck out and avoid him. So they put this lineup together, the Cardinals did today, knowing they're not going to really see the starter for more than one time through, and so don't, be overly committed to right or left. Just have it be basically a lineup that you want to be pretty impervious to silly bullpenning. That means this was a day where it did make a lot of sense to go left, right, all the way through the lineup, and Oliver Marmol did it. He put it together pretty much perfectly, where you just had 2 right-handers that would be bunched up consecutively. Your right-handers were Contreras in the 2, Arenado in the 4, Walker in the 6, backup catcher Pages, who's right now your starter, in the 7. The Walker-Pages spot was the only one that was back-to-back righties, and then it was Wynn in the 9-hole. Lefties were Nootbaar 1, Gorman 3, Burleson 5, and Victor Scott the 2nd, batting 8th. So they put that lineup together knowing this was a bullpen game. Sajacy was not part of it. And that, like, part of that makes sense because you don't want too many righties in a game where you're not necessarily, you're going to be seeing a different pitcher basically every inning is the way that it felt like it was going to be. So you don't want to stack too many righties in the lineup. You want to keep it relatively balanced. And so that's why they made sure, in my opinion, to have 4 left-handers in there, and that's why Sajacy gets boxed out. The other part of this is the runway conversation for Gorman. It's real. The Cardinals want to give it to him, so much so that on the day where Sajacy stayed, you would have thought on the surface, like, oh, that must mean he's about to get some run because the Cardinals know they need to keep him in the lineup. And that's how I wanted the day to begin. I wanted to see Thomas Sajacy in there, and I was kind of making fun when he wasn't. because I'm thinking, oh, sure, like the Cardinals have the luxury to keep a 900 OPS out of their lineup. So, like, don't pretend that I'm just sitting up here on my ivory tower and I can't ever see the minor, sometimes they might even just be minuscule criticisms that are levied, because I was doing the same thing this afternoon going, are you kidding me? How is the JC not in the lineup? Like, I'll do those instant reactions just like anybody else. What I then try to do, though, is dig in and figure out the why behind it. And it's a lot easier when I'm able to be covering the games at home. Somebody on the podcast wants to say, I'll send you to travel and cover every single road game, then let me know at b-schaefer12. You can DM me on Twitter. My finances are open for that, because that's really what we respect about people covering the games, the beat writers and the outlets that are sending those reporters. That's where a lot of this information comes from. And without it, you have to rely upon their good information, but then you credit their very good information to understand exactly what's going on with this team. And that's why I get there as often as I possibly can be with everything else that I have going on when the Cardinals are at home, because you know more when you're there. You can understand the context better, and I try to deliver the context to fans every day on this podcast. So that's sort of the background of what all of this is. But I noticed a couple of things this afternoon. I noticed a tweet from John Denton, who is there in Atlanta covering the series for MLB.com. And I immediately said, okay, this is a signal. This is kind of one where you put your antenna up. There's a reason that Oliver Marmol picks today to have this conversation. Now, part of it is he's asked a question, but he can blow off a question if he wants to. He doesn't have to dive into exactly or divulge exactly the level that they're going to be looking to do with something. John Denton tweets this out earlier before today's game. Or actually, this was during the game. But John Denton was, doing a lot, so he tweets it out about half hour into the game. Cardinals manager Oliver Marmol said before the game that he and his staff have mapped out the parameters of their lineups for the next 4 games, which I assume means, maybe that means through the end of the weekend, or maybe today was day 0, and then the next 4 is Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. At any rate, they're mapping out their lineups, and he has plans of having Nolan Gorman in the lineup each of the next 4 games to give the lefty slugger a consistent stretch of games. So if that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and then we'll see on Sunday, or if that means like, hey, today's game's already started, the next 4 he's playing, I don't know. That's part of the woes of not being there. And I think part of it, too, is you kind of wonder what the Brewers are going to do with their pitching, because they have not announced any of that. But basically the vibe of all of this is Nolan Gorman's going to play. He's getting the runway that has been bandied about, that has been talked about ad nauseum since November. They're basically saying, hey, remember, we didn't forget that we said that. We're doing that. And there are people who would say, Thomas Saggese should have been pitch hitting in the 6th inning because it was a left-on-left matchup. A little bit of background about that specific matchup. 1, Dylan Lehey for his career, yes, better against lefties than righties. He's a left-on-left. You would assume that would be the case. This year, it's very limited samples, so you have to take it all with a grain of salt. But this year, he had a sub-400 opposing OPS by right-handed batters so far this season. Righties were OPSing 399 against him. Again, limited sample, but those are the numbers. Lefties had been OPSing over 900 against Dylan Lehey this year, most of that coming from just a couple of isolated ABs. He was hit deep by Bryce Harper. He was hit deep by Jake Cronenworth. I went back and watched video to try to, this is the depth I'm going to ascertain, okay, what pitch of Dylan Lee's did they hit out, and what were the Cardinals maybe hoping to see from Nolan Gorman. 2 middle pitches, by the way, on the homers that Dylan Lehey has given up to lefties this year. Harper took a 95 fastball down the middle, took it out, and it was a bad slider to Cronenworth that hung up in the middle of the zone. So just putting that out there, the lefty reliever that everybody said, how could the Cardinals leave their 22-year-old rookie right-hander on the bench? That's the spot that you need to pinch hit your 22-year-old rookie right-hander, who probably has 2 career pinch hits to his name in MLB. I don't know the numbers offhand, but Saggese probably not spending a lot of time in his career pinch hitting, first of all. Secondly, the numbers actually this year kind of reverse of the splits that you would think. Too small of a sample, it's noise. You don't even necessarily want to use that as justification, but we've seen moments in times where the Cardinals have said, hey, this sample is something that mattered, and it was a small sample too. So that's why I bring it up, just so I'll give you the information, you decide what to do with it, right? But let's go ahead and talk about the game situation. 6th inning, bases loaded, right? Big spot, no doubt about it. It's the top of the 6th inning in a game that at that point was already tied. Let me double back to the box score to make sure I'm not speaking out of school on this. Mason Wynn had a ground ball to score a run, and then a wild pitch allowed another run to score. They walk Willson Contreras intentionally to set up the Gorman at bat after a pitching change to Dylan Lee a little bit before that. So bases loaded, 2 outs, Gorman, game on the line, right? 6th inning. But it's only the 6th inning. That spot's coming up again. 100% that spot's coming up again. And you just had the tweet from John Denton from 6:45 p.m. Central, 6:46, excuse me, where they said, hey, we're having Nolan Gorman in the lineup. Like, this was told by Oliver Marmol to the reporters pregame. That means something. What does it mean? It also means that part of that runway is they're not pinch hitting Sajacy for Nolan Gorman in the top of the 6th. Left on left or otherwise, they're not doing it. They batted him 3rd. He was right smack dab in the middle of it all. This is the showcase for Gorman. I'm not saying it's only going to be 4 days and done completely, but this is what they're hoping can be like, hey, dude, don't worry about it if you're in the lineup tomorrow. What had happened was you got injured, you came back, you weren't quite yourself, but we're going to continue to stick with you. This is the pouring into Nolan Gorman phase. This is the developmental phase that we have been belaboring the point on since November, December, for real. And now it's here. So don't be surprised when you see it again. And I have to be honest, for all the conversation I saw about it on Twitter, I was 0% surprised. Like, I start getting the DMs and the people responding and saying, why not pinch hit Sajacy? And I get it. Cardinals fans are locked in on every play, every moment. Sometimes maybe a little inside baseball, I think, is where that tendency could lead you. It could be a little bit overkill because it was never happening. There was never a scenario. And it wasn't a close decision. It wasn't like, oh, this is 50-50, could go either way. There was a 0% chance. And you might say, Brenden, you're a dummy. How can you say that? Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you they weren't doing it. With how they're viewing it, you don't have a day where you make it a mission for the media to understand, hey, remember that runway for Gorman? It's coming. I'm announcing it to you guys that it's here. Don't be surprised when you see him in there every single day. Please, dear God, stop asking me why Thomas Sajacy's not playing second. Like, that's just a little strategery and a little bit of the PR play by Oliver Marmol because he's getting out in front of it and saying, this is what the lineup's going to look like. They might find spots for Sajacy, or he may just be kind of an extra in this scene, and that'll be what it'll be. It'll look a lot better if the Cardinals are winning. I use this analogy with Mizzou. It's not an analogy. I use this concept with Mizzou basketball in the spring. They were beating Alabama, and they were rolling. Everybody knows I'm a Mizzou grad. I love Mizzou. It's my only fandom. It's the only sports fandom I have left, where I'm a true ride or die, and it's not tainted by being in the media or whatever. I do a radio show in Columbia about Mizzou. Don't care. I refuse to get close enough to it that my fandom goes away, or that there's a journalistic expectation that my fandom goes away. Not going to happen with Mizzou. That's my ride or die. I used this and said, you know what, Dennis Gates, I don't know with his lineups sometimes what's going on in years past. But if we're beating Alabama right now, I don't care what the lineups are. Who am I to judge, right? Put whoever on the basketball floor that you want. If you're beating Alabama, I'm an idiot if I'm second-guessing you, right? Later in the season, Mizzou started struggling, and I was like, it's kind of getting back to that point where I feel like I can speak up on what's going on with these rotations and these lineups. We'll make that analogy with the Cardinals. If they're winning, nobody should be yelling about Thomas Sajacy. Why isn't he playing? Who cares if it's working? If it's not, that's where the scrutiny, deservedly so, goes up. Where you go, really? Why is Burleson still batting 5th? Right? We've been talking about that the last couple nights. Tonight, Burleson 2 for 5 was able to get the job done. A lot of guys in the lineup that you were kind of looking sideways at, or at least kind of wondering, like, are they going to be able to hold up? They're starting to slide the wrong direction. Lars Nootbaar, 2 for 5, 3 RBIs, on base 3 times, scored 2 runs, hit a homer. Right back in the business. Burleson, 2 for 5, 2 runs scored. Even Jordan Walker didn't get a hit, but he was on base twice with a couple of walks and a run scored tonight. Pedro Pajes 1 for 5. He's playing because he's the catcher. Victor Scott on base 4 times, 3 for 4, scored 3 runs, had an RBI. He was awesome. His OPS is up to 774. I'm going to check my fantasy lineup right now during the podcast because I swear if I had him on the bench, I'm not going to be happy with myself. I think he's in there, though. I think he's one of those guys that I don't ever change it unless ESPN changed it on me. Let's see. Is he in there? Please, 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 please. Yes, he was in there. Good. And I'm winning the week so far. Okay. because he gets stolen bases. Like, you'd be silly to take him out in a categories league where steals are a whole category. Anyway, Victor was great. Mason Wynn comes back 1 for 3, had a big base knock, 2 RBIs on the night. And he's down there still batting ninth. The lineup looks so much different with Wynn in it. Just feels like it lengthens it a little bit more when he's batting down there, because I know his average is 229 and he's OPSing 613, but he's taking better ABs. He had a pretty good hit streak shortly before his injury, doing some really good things. Ivan Herrera comes back, and people asked in the Sports Hub post-game show tonight on Sports Hub STL, myself, Sarah Daly, after you're done listening to B-Schaeff Daily, go listen to the Sports Hub show from Tuesday night where we broke down the Cardinals post-game. We're talking about Ivan Herrera. People were commenting in. I didn't answer any of those comments because I don't know. Originally, they said it will be at least 4 weeks, and we haven't gotten there yet. The Cardinals are being very, very conservative with him. Like I've said before on this podcast, I've seen him up close and personal in the clubhouse and like wearing shorts, so I see his knee. Knee looks good to me, but he got an injection. Like they're gonna give it time. That's the point of a bone bruise, is like you don't necessarily see it. It's on the bone inside. So taking their time with Herrera, but to that end, you get him back in this lineup, and that'll be somebody where I will start to say, hey, you're pushing Burleson, you're pushing Walker, you're pushing some of those other guys on days where Pages is in the lineup at catcher, because you've got to figure out a way to get Herrera's bat in there, and that's really something that can make this thing go again. But nevertheless, you get Wynn back, and already some of those other guys starting to turn things around. A 2-hit game for Burleson, on base 4 times for Victor. Newpar, 2 for 5 with a homer and a walk. Suddenly things are looking well. Contreras is a guy that I absolutely have to mention, and I will as we get closer into the 8th inning conversation, because I had said, I think last night on B-Schaeff Daily, I expect his OPS to be at 700 or above before the end of the month. And that's only like a week and a half away, but today he goes 2 for 4, walks twice, and had a bat flip on a walk that was more majestic than almost any bat flip I have ever seen. So you could tell that he's starting to have some fun again and feel it as he gets the average up to 196, and the OPS is at 564. But before I skip ahead into the 8th inning and diagnosing and talking about really where the Cardinals and Contreras and Gorman were able to break this game open, I want to play just a little bit of audio from the postgame for FanDuel, because there were 2 questions about Nolan Gorman that I think are really relevant to hear for anybody that was going, I can't believe Thomas Saggese didn't get pinch hit for. And believe me, I'm acknowledging to y'all that at 4 p.m. this afternoon, I was going, why isn't Saggese in the lineup? That seems silly. But this is information I didn't have at that time, so I want y'all to hear it.
See Gorman making strides.
He is, and he's going to continue to, man. He's working hard at it, and that's all you can ask him to do. He's been getting after it with Brownie and Packy and BA in that group, and making sure that he continues to make contact. He's going to punch out from time to time, but that hopefully we can build off that hit, man. That was a big part of that game. We've been needing that over the last week or so to see him come through there was awesome.
You told us before the game that he's going to get an extended run.
Yeah.
He's hitting the ball well right now. Can you just talk about rewarding him and giving him a chance to
yeah, we have to keep our word there, right? We said that we would, and even after the injury, him coming back doesn't look good for a week. That's not runway. You have to allow him to go through some of the ups and downs, and he's going to get better, man. He's working hard at it, and we're committed to seeing it through.
So that's Oliver Marmol answering post-game questions about Nolan Gorman's big swing, which was a bases-clearing double, I believe it was. He ended up at third base, but I think that's on the throw. Yeah, 3-run double for Gorman down the right field line. Huge, huge monster swing for this kid who, yeah, he was 0 for 4 up until that point in the game. Had 2 strikeouts up until that point in the game. Was the reason they won the game with that swing, because I think if he punches out again in that spot, I don't know if the Cardinals score a 5th run in this game, and they ended up with 10. So hugely clutch swing by Nolan Gorman, and there's going to be an opportunity over the next few days for more of them, because as we have outlined here, he will be in the lineup. So don't be surprised if you're a listener of this show tomorrow when you see Gorman in there, and maybe Saggese will be. Maybe Brendan Donovan's not ready again, and they find a way to get Thomas in there too. Gorman's going to be in there, and that's part of the development and part of basically, and whether you agree with it or not, I think it is part of what has to happen this year, which is like, all right, if it's a transition / developmental, yes, it still matters to win because the guys out there are trying to win, and you'd like to see the Cardinals surprise some people and end up with more wins at the end of the year than the general populace expects. But there are moments within games where you're like, we're going to stick with Gorman left on left. It's not a consideration to pinch hit for him because this is the window where we're giving him opportunities. We want to find out what it's going to look like. What does that look like for Nolan Gorman to take that at bat in that spot? Okay, what does it look like for him to take the next one after failing in the previous one? Oh, it turns out it looks like he can still battle and hang on this given night. Because for 2026, there's a fork in the road with, I think, multiple prongs of possibility. One prong is Chaim Bloom looks at this Gorman season, which ends up with a lot of opportunity and results and data and plate appearances because they want to see what it looks like so that the next guy is as informed as he can be when he decides what to do with this roster. And he trades Nolan Gorman because he just doesn't think that he's going to make it with the Cardinals. And maybe there's a team out there that thinks he's got, the potential to be that dude, and so they still get good value for him. Maybe that's, door number one. Door number two, he's an everyday guy for the Cardinals, and actually they're going to go ahead and extend him because they really believe in him and they think they can get a better price on him now before that 40 home run season really gets unlocked. Because let's say he has a good year this year, not a great one, and they want to give him a contract extension. Maybe door number three is they don't extend him, but they do think he's an everyday piece in their lineup. And, they trade some of the other guys that are in that DH or second base conversation because they want to make sure Gorman goes into 2026 able to play 150-plus games because they want the bat in the lineup based on what they learned from 2025. Again, not predicting. I'm trying to lay out all the possibilities here. Door number four is maybe, you know what? There's still something in here for Nolan Gorman, but we get more out of him when he's not exposed to left-handed pitching. And so he's on the team next year, but it's a throwback to like the Tampa Bay Ray way of doing things where everybody's a platoon guy. And you saw it play out in 2025, the guys that could maybe go beyond that platoon status, and then everybody else you're never going to see them again against the same handedness because it just hasn't worked out. And this is the way the roster can be the most efficient. Like, those are four doors, and I probably could sit here and come up with two more. That's what this summer is going to be about. And maybe along the way, the Cardinals accidentally win too many games, and they start to turn it up and say, hey, can we add a bullpen piece in July? What do we need to do to get this thing over the hump? Like, that's still a possibility, too, I think. I don't think John Mozeliak would have any problem with that because he wants to go out on top if he can. He wants to go out with a positive season if that's in play. So a lot of different ways that this could obviously go, but that's part of what goes into. I know everybody thought, hey, this is a 50-50 call, and Ollie made the wrong one. Hey, Gorman popped out or whatever he did, and he didn't come through in the top of the sixth. No, it was a 100% to 0% call. He was never subbing Gorman out of the game, and 2 innings later, you saw why. Like, that's part of the way that this is going to play out. So just feeling like I need to put that through because there are times where decisions are made that are highly criticized and the Cardinals lose. They don't always lose because of those decisions, but it can sometimes feel like that. If that's the way that you want to handle it, though, when things go to hell in a handbasket, can you then turn around and acknowledge, actually, I thought it should be this way tonight, but the way they did it ended up being the reason they won the game. Somebody else contributed in that 8th inning, though, and it doesn't happen without his contributions that the Cardinals win this game. Willson Contreras taking a tough walk, actually, ahead of the Gorman at bat that ended up being difference-making, honestly, because if you don't get that result from Contreras to load the bases, who knows exactly the way the rest of that unfolds, because you don't even see Nolan Gorman coming up to the plate, right? Like, Contreras makes an out. There are 2 outs in that spot. Inning's over. And you never get that bases loaded Gorman at bat. So that ended up being just an absolutely massive, massive moment. And Contreras knew it, and he bat flipped that sucker. He bat flipped a walk. You know Wilson's back on the grind and on the vibe when he's bat flipping walks the way that he did there. And it ended up being a pretty good result. So you feel good about that. I wanted to make sure I gave Willson his flowers and acknowledge that, like, he's on the way back up. I think you're going to see him continue to look better and better, and the numbers are already coming up for him, as we knew that they would. And it probably doesn't get more fun than going from 0-2 to, I believe it was a 9-pitch walk after fouling off some pitches, working the count, and extending the inning to Gorman being able to come through. That win doesn't happen without that plate appearance by Willson Contreras. So there's a lot to really like about the Cardinals and the way they grinded tonight offensively. Now find a way to continue making that happen moving forward. Miles Michaelis against Bryce Elder on Wednesday. I think it's going to have to be similar. I kind of predicted this one would have to be a game where the Cardinals just broke through on offense. It doesn't make me a genius. Like, that's just what they needed. And I think it'll set up similarly on Wednesday because Michaelis is just not destined to get much deeper than 5 innings because of what the opposing lineup can do to him, unless he's got a really good lead to work with and he can kind of be in the zone and take some risks. And if he starts to give up those solo homers, then you pull him there. But I think it's the offense against Bryce Elder, who's got a 7.2 ERA and has given up 4 or 5 runs in his last couple of starts. That's what the Cardinals will be hopefully looking to do on Wednesday and come up with a series win. And things can turn around awfully quickly. Like if you win Wednesday, which I think the Cardinals ought to do based on the pitching matchup and kind of what they found with their offense tonight, if they can make that happen, come home, you're down, 11-14 would be the record. And you go back home where you've played .666 baseball is the winning percentage. They're 8-4. So we'll see what that looks like. But because it is a B-Schaeff Daily during the season where there's minor league baseball going on, we should go right now down on the farm. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? We will start with the AAA Memphis Redbirds tonight. That's the main stop that we want to make on the Cardinal minor league roundup here with Down on the Farm. Michael McGreevy gets a win and pitched really well. His time's coming. 6 innings, 1 run allowed, no walks, 5 Ks. Yeah, 6 innings, 6 hits, and 5 strikeouts without walking anybody. You give up 1 run. He's got a 3.60 ERA down there. It's good enough for me. I think you'll see him just as soon as there's a spot. And there is probably some additional scrutiny on Miles Michaelis. I think it's risky if the Cardinals were to say he would keep giving you these decent outings but not great ones. It would be risky to go ahead and still kick him to the curb and say, hey, we're paying you, but we don't want you pitching. We're going to have McGreevy in there instead. There will come a point in the summer where they do feel that way, I expect. Like, I still think Miles Michaelis probably doesn't finish the season on the Cardinal roster unless he just really locks it in, because there are ways that you just need to try to find to get Michael McGreevy in there. And if everybody stays healthy, Michaelis, the burden of proof is going to be on him to keep that spot. That being said, for right now, McGreevy is really your only minor league starter that you feel very good about. It's just not been easy with all the injuries that have happened. So McGreevy was great. He'll be here soon, and he'll deserve it when he's here. The lineup was good tonight for the Redbirds. They win 8-3. There's just not a lot of guys in the lineup that I think are prospect caliber to talk about. Jimmy Crooks had a good game though. 1 for 3, a couple of runs scored on base twice with walks, and his 1 hit was a homer. Ryan Valade homered as well, outfielder for them. Jose Barrero, batting third, was on base 3 times. Fermin, nice job offensively. So they got the bats going as well, just as the Cardinals did at the big league level on Tuesday. The Double-A squad, the Cardinals down in Springfield, they did not. They were taking on the Wind Surge of, I believe, where are the Wind Surge located? Somewhere in Kansas. Yeah, Wichita Wind Surge. 12-1 losers were the Springfield Cardinals today. The only reason I bring him up, Bryson Mott's pitched well. 4 innings, 1 run, and he's a name you'll start to hear more and more. Had 6 strikeouts. Double-A rotation's honestly looking kind of sneaky right now, and some of those guys might end up in AAA before it's all said and done in 2025. The update is no J.J. Weatherholt yet in the lineup. I have not heard anything long-term on him. We've been kind of clinging to Kyle Reese saying that it was precautionary. I kind of disagree with just being precautionary, but that might be just not a serious injury is what your hope is. But it's been several days since we've seen him, so we'll kind of see what ends up happening there. But I have just not seen any other notable update. If anybody has it, drop it. But that's really all that we know right now in terms of J.J. Weatherholt. I wouldn't worry, though, again, even if it's not like strictly precautionary, because if it was, maybe he would have already been back in there. Hopefully it's not a long-term absence for him. I guess I could look and make sure before we get out of here to check the player page and make sure there has been no like transaction log updates on him. No. So he's not on the minor league IL or anything. So that's what we know about J.J. Weatherholt, which is basically nothing, but he'll be back soon, you hope. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the show. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.